Homeless hero coming from the vantage point of a certain school with a famous marching band is asking about the best marching band in the ACC. Do you have any opinions on that?
Well, the best marching band in the Big Ten is the University of Michigan marching band, 235 member Michigan marching band, to be clear.
Really?
So let's just start there.
Against Ohio State? The
Like I
script
said, the University of
Ohio
Michigan
and
marching band, 235 member. I had their CD growing up, honestly and truly. I really did, or a couple CDs from the University of Michigan.
okay, so I'm not qualified to fight you on this by any
uh,
stretch of the imagination. And
right.
obviously I will at least admit when I'm hugely biased as opposed to the people that I talk to. I'm not
Mhm.
talking about you.
Yeah,
I'm talking
I
about
get
the
you.
folks that call in and so forth every day. I was trying to get this point across. I divert for just a second here.
Come with it.
Nebraska, Michigan, 1997, they split a national championship. I am just begging. I am begging and pleading while I'm running a debate show and basically saying, let's size up these two teams, so
Mhm.
forth and so on. I think that they have both earned a national championship because there's no way to differentiate between two schools that played high caliber schedules, won their conference, went undefeated. There's just no reasonable or fair way to say, well, they did X, Y, and Z against this schedule. Therefore, let's award them a national championship. I think justice was served in terms of justice would have been served, obviously, playing a game. But
Yeah.
since
Yeah.
we did not have that, that both schools have a rightful claim to the national championship or a national championship. And I cannot sit here 25 years later and say Nebraska would have won that game for sure, or Michigan would have won that game for sure. And I think it's beyond ludicrous that people get on here and say Michigan would have won for sure or Nebraska would have won for no idea.
Mm.
I state that because sports fans, college football fans in particular, because that's who we deal with here, are just insanely biased.
Mhm.
And that's okay. Just admit it. And I would have loved and was begging and pleading of what turned out to probably be an audience of 2,500 people, not live, but in watching that video. If I would have had one example of a Michigan or a Nebraska fan come to the table and say, you know what? I actually think they might have been a little bit better and they might have beaten us. But there was no examples of that.
Facts.
Everybody
Zero.
takes their allegiance to their side, which is fine, but just admit it.
Yeah.
Because if everyone saw it from an unbiased standpoint, then the randomness of the odds would just tell you that if people were just being able to objectively watch football or review the results and the statistics, that you would have Michigan people saying, you know what, Nebraska might have been better, or Nebraska people saying, you know what, Michigan might have been better, but that doesn't exist.
Right.
So that brings us to the marching band.
Mm.
Yes, I am probably even more biased about this than I am the football
Yeah.
because I'm in the habit of taking just the nuts and bolts of the stats and the results in the
Mm.
football. And I think I do I'm not saying I'm not biased toward Ohio State. I am,
Right.
but I do my best to filter that out and objectively. But when this is just me being wowed my entire life since I was 8 years old by Script Ohio
Yeah.
and all the other formations that they put together.
Mhm.
So explain the Michigan excellence in this
I'm from
area.
Detroit. I grew up as a Michigan fan. I'm not going to say, like, please, no. Like, that's
Oh, so
100%
you're
that. Like,
attacking it from the same way
oh
that I
yeah, no,
am.
totally. I'm being totally biased in
Okay.
that. I just
Okay.
said, I said
Okay.
that whole diatribe right there was born of
Well, you
me
had me
needling.
fooled.
Yeah, like I mean, whatever. I'm not. Yeah, like no,
Okay.
I'm never going to say that. So I just want to say that. But in terms of the ACC, which is the actual asked question by Hummus Hero, I think that there is a short list of the really good bands. I'm not going to get into the whole history, but basically Miami, they kicked the marching band between athletic oversight and funding and music department school of music oversight and funding many times. And with every volley back and forth, the funding dropped. Long story, good buddy of mine, Joe, was band captain for a year and a half at the University of Miami. He was on bass drum number 4 for 2 years, and then he was on the snare line after that. So like he would wax poetic about all these things. So like I know more about band politics than I care to. But I just wanted to share that obviously as a University of Miami Frost School of Music alum, and my good friend Joe, who's also a School of Music alum and everything, was in the band for 4 years and all those kind of things. I just wanted to share that. I know that Miami is not anywhere near the top. Honestly, marching band is probably near the bottom. Unfortunately, I will say that. At the top end, I will say you're probably looking at Florida State. And I've talked about this forever. The first time in person, 2000, Miami, Florida State in the Orange Bowl was my first in-person interaction with that rivalry. And just first of all, that whistle is iconic. And they have a specific brand of whistle. All the drum majors in the world, they know that whistle. And you can hear it over anything. And I think it was after a big sack or something that Miami had done, and everybody is in full throat. I mean, this just roaring crowd in the Orange Bowl. And at the Orange Bowl, what they used to do is they used to put the opposing band in the upper deck, the last little itty bitty section. And so they're up there, and I saw in way down in the, if you remember, the Orange Bowl was that horseshoe, right? That, shape. And way down in the front, like very corner of that section, saw the all white jumper. Saw that little dude. He went from this side to this size, and you heard that whistle, and you have that drum fill, deep, 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 boom, and that downbeat hit of the full Seminole War chant. And I was actually not in the student section that time. I was actually sitting around the 50, 40-yard line. I snuck in and sat next to somebody else, whatever. So I was not in the student section, like directly across from them, all the way at the end there on the Miami sideline. I was near the 50. So they were pointed directly at me, and it felt the sound from the bells of those horns felt like the fire of 10,000 suns. It was ridiculous. And this is somebody who grew up in Big Ten country. Like, I played clarinet in band. I've seen all these marching bands, Michigan State. I've never seen O State in person. I've seen them on TV. I've never actually been to the game in Ann Arbor or Columbus. I've never been there, so I've not seen it in person. But it was truly it just they basically hit the STFU button from the upper deck, like when they started crank that thing at full volume. It was incredible. So I think the Florida State is at the top of the ACC. I think Clemson's band is also skilled and large in number, and they have like a couple of band tags that they play all the time. So I think that they're kind of towards the top. The North Carolina schools, I really don't think have very good marching bands, to be perfectly honest. From what I've seen, Boston College, they're not really that great. The Virginia teams don't really have great bands. Georgia Tech does some fun stuff, but I wouldn't say that it's overall the same quality. Louisville's band has been fun for a while, so I would put them kind of in that top part of the conversation. And I think that's pretty much about it that I can think of. So yeah, you're looking at Florida State, Clemson, maybe a Louisville, maybe a Georgia Tech, just because they've done some fun things in the past, at least in terms of the band. But yeah, I mean there are a good number, but I mean for my money, like across the sport, I think that and this is totally biased of me growing up in Big Ten country, I think that the instrumentation of Big Ten bands and the arrangements of the songs they play. So the instrumentation is like the composition of the band in terms of how many of which instrument there are. That's what I mean by instrumentation. So, like there's places that are woodwind heavy. So you have a lot more woodwinds as opposed to brass. And then in the brass section, maybe they have more mellophones, maybe they have more euphonium. Well, mellophones and euphoniums technically are the same thing. But you know what I mean? Like they have different numbers of the different instrument classes. But the way that Big Ten bands are constructed from an instrumentation standpoint, and then the music is arranged, that is more traditional marching band to me than anything else. And I think that Florida State is more like that than some of these other bands and everything. And then, I mean, also in Big Ten country, hey, I will say, best fight song in sports, and I hate it. Well, I don't hate it, but I hate to say it, but the best fight song in sports, USC. That fight on, hoof, 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 with the key and everything. I mean, you could hear the the Hollywood influences of that in the middle when they come back and they have that key change, and then you get those trumpets coming. I mean, like if you close your eyes, it feels like you are marching to the walls of Troy, man. It is really, really a superb composition of music. But that's my personal take on it, and I know that it is, biased by where I'm from and like what this is very much like what I would do. Or in the way that I would do it. Kind of like if you're like, hey, if you ran a football team, like what would be the scheme that you ran? Or like, hey, if you were a basketball coach, which I've done in the past, like what would be, what sets would you do, or what would you like? That's based upon a lot of what I've done or what I would do in terms of that answer. But yeah, I mean, something to see, but hopefully I don't really see Miami growing the band just because I don't think the money is there. But hey, it is what it is.
Well, we lost about 30% of the audience talking about the marching bands, but I personally enjoyed that.